Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing another open workshop video, beta reading subscriber query letters. Querying is a very vulnerable thing. It can be very scary to share your pitches on a public platform. I always wanted to be very sensitive of that. Obviously, I'm still not an expert. I'm not a literary agent. I think it's very important to remember how much of querying is a cocktail of so many factors. You can write a great pitch, but maybe your sample pages still need work, or the agent's tastes might not align, or their list might have a title that's already similar. My goal with this video is more to talk about the construction of the pitch itself, and hopefully that will help anyone who is currently querying. House rules for open workshop videos. All feedback is constructive, not destructive. Just be kind to your fellow writers. Our first submission is from Alyssa. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sharing your letter for this video. I'm so excited to read your query. I haven't looked at these in advance, so if you guys don't follow Alyssa, I will link her channel in the description box. You guys should definitely follow her. Okay, so dear first name, last name, I'm seeking representation for my adult thriller, The Wedding Season, complete at 75,000 words. It is perfect for fans of Freedom McFadden's The Housemaid, with a wedding atmosphere comparable to The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I'm not a thriller reader, but I will look up the comps really quickly. Okay, so very popular book, published in 2022, another very popular book. So these are good comps. 3 weddings, 3 bodies, 1 killer playlist. That's a great tagline. The book that I queried, which we recently sold, it's coming out fall 2025, but my publisher had to make a tagline, and my publisher, my agent, all of us, we kind of went back and forth about what the tagline should be. So my publisher had come up with a bunch of options, but taglines are very tough. The fact that you have one is already really good. It plays on a pun. It's still very thrillery. It's a good hint for what is to come. Seasoned wedding DJ Eileen is ready to quit. Between handsy groomsmen and battles with bridezillas, she'd be long gone if it weren't for her upcoming nuptials with her forever frat boy fiance. Okay, this is great. This is the introduction to our character. We have already a sense for who she is, what she does, and a hint as to what the conflict is going to be. When she's approached by a wealthy family with a contract to DJ their daughter's upcoming weddings, Eileen jumps at the opportunity for some extra cash, even when the weddings make her the target of a stalker who's determined to make her life a living hell. Okay, so we've got the inciting incident. What starts as a cash grab to jumpstart her future quickly turns into a series of crime scenes. Okay, so then I don't think we need to mention, because queries need to be super quick and concise, I don't think we need to mention that she wants the cash twice. So we might just be able to say, the other thing about this sentence is, at what point does she know that she's been made the target of a stalker? Because does she accept the job knowing that that's a risk, or does she find out after she's accepted the job? I would consider phrasing this inciting incident just to clarify that. Might say Eileen jumps at the opportunity before realizing made her the target of a stalker who is determined to make her life a living hell. And then instead of saying for some extra cash, is it just some extra cash, or is it a significant amount of money that will jumpstart her future? I think that's what you can put there. So put this up here, and then you can just say, you don't have to use this phrasing, you know the story best. Move this into inciting incident. She is quickly embroiled in a series of, you can choose something more powerful here. That's just a thought. Each wedding comes with its own dead body. This is cool. I like this. Every encounter with the wealthy Hart family leaves her with more questions. As more bodies drop and the evidence begins to point in her direction, Eileen notices a chilling pattern. Everyone who crosses the Harts ends up dead. As her stalker's advances become more violent and personal, she realizes that by signing this contract, she may have traded her playlist for a place on the death list. Eileen has been trained to deal with any possible wedding emergency, but nothing could prepare for a dance with death. Okay, slay. Up here, I would just say like personalization if you can. So you need some word count for that. If it's relevant, these are just some thoughts. Why are the hearts wealthy? Can we hint at like anything more about them? But I think that this reads to me as a pitch that has been very fine-tuned. I might split this up into a third paragraph. What's great about Alyssa's pitch is that it's very, very structured. Yeah, we have the intro to a character, we have the inciting incident, we have the core conflict, and then we have the stakes. One thing that I would suggest, just to reinforce the stakes, just something to hammer in that Eileen has to like obviously clear her name, or I think it could benefit from like one more sentence. So some sentence that is like, if she doesn't, the real killer is YZ will happen, you know, something like that, just to give us some sense for like, this is her goal, this is what she has to do. I think that could like really help tie everything together. I do like this line. The other thing that Alyssa has done really well is set a tone and then sustain it. Like, we know that she's a wedding DJ, and so we start with that, weddings and playlist, and it's tied back in like the last sentence of the pitch. This is a really great query. Just to look at the bio, I'm a wedding DJ based in Minnesota and have worked over 40 weddings in my career so far. Though I haven't encountered any serial killers that I know of, each day on the job inspires the heart of this story and its characters. I also daylight as a videographer and reader of chunky books. It's also a great bio. So Alyssa has provided a very relevant detail about herself. Thank you so much to Alyssa for sharing this query letter. And Alyssa, like, if you are willing to share like how many drafts you have written, because this reads to me as an extremely polished draft. Let's look at the next query letter. This was submitted by Anaïs. Dear Name of Agent, I am delighted to present you with Shedding Velvet, my multi-POV YA low fantasy thriller. This dark academia novel will appeal to fans of the magical realism and found family in The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, set in the suffocating world of privilege and academia of Stags by M.A. Bennett. Given your interest in tropes, themes, genres, I believe my folkloric mystery to be a great fit for you. The full manuscript stands completed at 108,000 words. Very small, I would just say, I believe may be a great fit for you. So yeah, this is great. This is the personalization. So yeah, actually, this is a good thing to point out, is that when you are personalizing for an agent, every agent's manuscript wish list looks so different. It doesn't have to be actual plot elements. It can be something like genres. It can be something like themes. Some agents do list tropes. Like, don't stress over the personalization, because agents will usually have at least something that you can maybe latch onto. 108 is long for a YA, but you are crossing over into like fantasy, so that might be okay. In the small Irish town of Dother, I don't know if I'm saying that right, I'm sorry, where privilege and poverty are two edges of the same blade, the murder of a student rocks the precarious balance and hierarchy established, unearthing secrets that should have remained buried. Okay. This is great. I think there's some extra words that you might not need. I think you just say rocks the precarious hierarchy. Taylor Crown has waited years to consolidate her role as a credible journalist, despite the tabloid nature. So if this is YA, I think in Kidlit, I want to include ages. I don't know how old she is, but just for example, I'm gonna say something like 17-year-old. Has waited years to consolidate her role as a credible journalist, despite the tabloid nature of the school paper she's at the head of. Say she leads. I don't think you need to say so. I think that's implied. When her private school's golden boy. I feel like if the school is the main setting here, you might want to mention the school up in this world building paragraph. The murder of a student at like whatever illustrious private school, name of school, like that, right? So that way when you get into the details, alternatively, you can also cut this out and just mention the private school here, but that's up to you. When the school golden boy, Richard Legrand, is found brutally murdered in the nearby woods, she's first on the case, but as the investigation unravels and vile secrets are revealed... Willow has to ask herself if her ambition is worth the destruction it entails. There's kind of like overlapping details with this first paragraph in here that I'll suggest. Like if I was rewriting this, you could say something like, the school golden boy, Richard LeGrand, she's first in the case, but as vile secrets are revealed, Willow has to ask herself if her ambition is worth the destruction it entails. Robin Farrow has been on the search for their missing friend Holly since she first vanished over the summer and has taken up the investigation where the police abandoned it. I'll say after the police abandoned it. With Richard LeGrand's death, their search takes on a renewed urgency, particularly when unexpected connections between the seedier and more elevated sides of their small town come to light, giving possible links between Holly's disappearance and Richard's death. Delana Bluegrave is a psychic, although none of her friends are inclined to believe her, and when Richard LeGrand is found murdered, the forest seems to reach out to her for spiritual help. Something evil is infecting the woods, possibly at the root of other tragedies, and she's determined to weed it out no matter what kind of horror may lie beneath the surface. The trio of friends dive headfirst into the mystery of Richard's death, but with every terrible secret that is revealed, the thread that binds them grows tauter as the unshakable world they thought they knew trembles. That's a great ending. So one thing I'm noticing is that I think you can probably make this more concise. I just took a little bit of a break so that I had a lot of thoughts. Okay, so I do have some questions. This is just the blurb. So the first thing is, in the establishing paragraph, I think you can say, in the small Irish town of Dother, golden boy of whatever the school's name is found brutally murdered in the nearby woods, unearthing secrets that should have remained buried. I know that the author has established class as a theme. Theme is always good to ground in your pitch itself. And I think because Richard's death is the through line of each POV, I think that's something you can just establish at the top. I'm not sure if you need to say the age of all of the characters. When word spreads about Richard LeGrand's death, she's first on the case, but as the investigation unravels, vile secrets are revealed, and Willow must ask herself if her ambition is worth the destruction it entails. I really like this pitch. Some of the key stakes here might be just a little too vague. I would like some hint of what the vile secrets are. I know that there's an inclination to not give spoilers in a pitch, but I think that there's a way that you can phrase these sorts of stakes without giving spoilers. So I would just like some kind of inclination about why the secrets are vile, what kind of destruction it will have on Willow as a character and or on the town. Robin Farrow has been searching for their missing friend Holly since she first vanished over the summer, taking up the investigation after the police abandoned it. Their search takes on a renewed urgency as unexpected connections between the seedier and more elevated sides of their town come to light, giving possible links between Holly's disappearance and Richard's death. So I get the impression in Robin's paragraph that there is going to be some kind of exploration of class and class disparity. Does Holly come from the quote unquote seedier part of the town, and does Richard come from the more elevated part of the town? If so, I think that's something that you can maybe clarify. I'm obviously making assumptions, but I do think that's worth clarifying because I think that this is the paragraph where you can show in context the disparity between the privileged class and the theme between poverty and privilege. So I think being more specific there could help. Okay, Delana Bluegrave is a psychic, although none of her friends are inclined to believe her. Something evil is infecting the woods, possibly at the root of the town's multitude of tragedies, and she's determined to weed it out no matter what kind of horror may lie beneath the surface. I think this is fine as a paragraph. I would like to know what Delana's personal stake is, because Willow, we know, wants to be a journalist, wants to report on things that are meaningful, and for Robin, we know that they have a missing friend named Holly. I would like to know if Delana has a personal stake as well. Can we tie that into the conflict? But overall, I think that this is great. I think your comps are great. I love the multi-POV. I think the pitch lives up to, tonally, it lives up to a YA thriller and a dark academia as well, right? Yeah, I think all of the elements are clearly in there. I wouldn't be surprised if you get interest on your pitch as it is. If I was being really picky as an agent, I think it's worth considering what other ways that you can speak to the vile secrets and the unexpected connections. Thank you so much for sharing your pitch. The next pitch comes from Rachel at Rachel Writes Fiction. Your agent name, agent personalization. I'm seeking representation for my 150,000 word literary fiction, psychological suspense novel, Good Times. If I'm an agent, the word count is going to stick out to me. I would be very, very careful about querying anything over 120, maybe 125,000 words. I have seen for debut authors, I don't know if this is your debut, agents talk about word count. 150 for literary fiction is long. If anyone who writes literary fiction can share any thoughts on a 150k word count, please let me know. But that's something that I would just be very conscious of, and if at all possible, if you can get the word count down, I think it might be safer. In 1977, 29-year-old Leonard is going nowhere, living in his run-of-the-middle college town, spurned by a world obsessed with dance and drink. Leonard is a persona non grata with no college education, no steady job, no house of his own, no wife, no girlfriend. A mother who doesn't know what to make of him, a community that doesn't recognize his ideals of manhood, and a wounded ego. Leonard cannot find a role for himself in a society figuring out where women stand. Searching for purpose, Leonard begins to stalk the local disco but finds none of the affection or attention he yearns for. To fill the void, he turns to the only coping mechanism he knows, taught to him by his deadbeat father, violence. This is very long for an intro paragraph. I don't think we need all of the information. So this is your intro to main character. Focus this down into key details. A lot of this stuff is like we can infer, right? Do we need to know that he has no college education, job, relationships? Like some of this stuff is implied. I think it's good to know the time period, and as long as you can establish that he has no prospects in his life and he's feeling very empty because of it, I think that's fine. Leonard begins to stalk the local disco but finds none of the affection he yearns for. Searching for purpose and struggling to find the affection he yearns for, Leonard turns to the only coping mechanism taught to him by his deadbeat father, violence. When he sets his sights, so this is part of inciting incident, when he sets his sights on the clerk at his favorite record store, maybe the only person who is pretty and friendly to him, he wonders if the tables finally turned in his favor. I don't know if we need that either. I think we can see his sense of hope if you mention that she's friendly to him, who sets his sights on the, let's say, pretty clerk, the only person who is friendly to him. Leonard will be forced to face terrifying possibility that a world making room for women like them has no place for a man such as him. Through its multiple POV structure, Good Times dives to a so-called deviant mind with nuance and illustrates a vivid representation of the everyday nature of gendered violence. Readers of Notes on an Execution and Bright Young Women will appreciate the thoughtful recentering on victims. I always like to say things like may. It just sounds less direct. May appreciate the thoughtful recentering on victims' narratives alongside the inflicting portrayal of a brutal protagonist. Good Times was born out of a lifelong fascination with true crime mythologies we build around perpetrators and their victims, as well as my BA in English literature and women's and gender studies. This is a really interesting pitch. I really like a lot of the details here. The only thing is that I think it needs a clearer through line. We know that Leonard is struggling with understanding his values of manhood. That is very difficult in a society that is starting to have shifting discussions about gender roles. That's a good thing to establish. He yearns for affection. He sets his sights on the clerk. He wonders if the tables have finally turned in his favor. I think maybe just clarify, like, because it's framed as he sets his sights on her, but how does she feel about it? Why does he feel like the tables have turned in his favor? Does she show interest in him? Is there a conflict between them that we can hint at? And also, what pushes him to confront woman after woman at the club? Is there a connection between his encounter with the clerk? Like, so my only thing with this paragraph, what I'm just looking for is like connective tissue between this sentence and this sentence. I think that will help like make the pitch feel more solid instead of just like listing a bunch of things that Leonard is feeling and doing. It's a minor thing, but I think it would go a long way in just understanding what the plot is. So that's like conflict and stakes here. I think these like comps and the way that you describe them are good. One of the things that I see sometimes in query letters is that the comps are so vague and we don't really understand like why you've chosen them. This like gives you a really good sense of like what you're trying to do with the work. The only sticking points for me is that the intro to Leonard is a bit long. I don't think it needs to be that long. I think the word count is worth reconsidering. I only worry that agents, they're going to make judgment calls on like, does this author know how to revise? Do they know how to focus their plot? Because literary fiction, thriller space usually isn't that long. My only like fear is that an agent will auto reject on word count. And I just don't want that to happen to you. But other than that, I think this is great. Thank you so much for sending this pitch. I'm editing this video and I realized that I forgot to mention, but this pitch does state that this is a multi-POV book. I think it's worth considering a version of the pitch where mention those other perspectives. I think it's important to remember that when agents are reading queries, a lot of the times they're skimming. They aren't going to necessarily like slow down and like analyze the pitch like multiple times. Some agents might, but I know that most agents are reading hundreds of queries a week. I think the way that this pitch is structured makes you think that Leonard is the only character, and it's only that one little line that mentions a multi-POV structure. For any other writers who might be writing like a similarly structured book, maybe you have one character who you feel like is the focal point character or the anchor character, but there's other perspectives in the book that are, you know, being explored. Think, for example, with a pitch like this, you can open the pitch talking about one of the characters. So in this example, it would be Leonard. You can mention it's 1977, you're following this character. This is what he is struggling with. This is the conflict that he's facing and how he's going to be challenged throughout the book. I think you can do all of that in a single paragraph, maybe two. And then in your third paragraph, can kind of mention all the other perspectives that you're going to be following. Set better expectations for an agent, because I think if an agent were reading this pitch very quickly, they might miss that it's actually a multiple POV book. So actually, someone asked me this in a comment, how do I pitch a multi-POV book? I linked to a letter that was on an agent's website. I'm going to share this pitch because I think it's a good example of if you have multiple characters, but you might have one character that is like your anchor character, you might have other characters that the book also explores. And this book is actually published now. It's called The Unmothers by Leslie J. Anderson. Carolyn Marshall, chainsmoker, cynical journalist, recent widow. That's another like really nice technique. Depending on the tone of and the voice of your story, like you can tell like how quickly this author is getting to like the points of the pitch and like how quickly and easily they're painting a picture for this character. Carolyn Marshall, chainsmoker, cynical journalist, recent widow, is being punished by her editor, sent to a small town to investigate a frivolous tabloid story of a horse that gave birth to a human baby. Despite her resentment for the assignment, she begins to wonder if the story might be true. Pulled into the mystery, Marshall finds a town that births its own monsters and refuses to face its own sins and secrets. Marshall finds the baby's father, Roswell, a damaged boy living in the shadow of his equally damaged mother. Undeterred, Marshall follows Roswell as he moves through the world of horse people, helping to rescue horses, learning to ride, facing the trauma of her own recent loss. Meanwhile, the strange tides of the town ebb and flow around her. A drug dealer tries to fight the monster in the woods. A young man struggles to rescue his friend from addiction. A pastor faces the secret violence done in the graveyard at night. The dark truth, held in trust by generations of Rayford women, is that the creature of the woods is more than a legend. Okay, so anyways, yeah. That was only 2 paragraphs. Before we even get to the stakes paragraph, that last one where it says, Marshall and Roswell claw a way out while the infighting in the town provides a new target for the monster's wrath. Like 2 paragraphs. We introduce the main character, Carolyn. We introduce a second key character, Roswell. and then we just kind of like quickly give a hint for the other characters. I think similarly with a pitch like the query letter we were just reading, it would help to kind of have a similar line where you hint at who are the other characters coming in and out of the novel. If you do have a multi-POV pitch, it is worth it to tease who those other perspectives are so that you set the right expectations for the agent. I was just about to start editing this video. When I closed the submission form, I realized that we had a few more submissions, so I thought we might as well add them. Okay, so our next submission comes from Sarah. I hope I'm saying that right. Dear Agent, Stars, Chains, Reactions is a 90,000 word adult sci-fi fantasy following 5 earthbound celestials, the astronomer who unknowingly triggered the fall and their race against time to break the binds that trap them before the stars burn out forever. One thing I do like about this opening pitch is that it has like a log line. I do think that if you can have a log line at the top of your pitch, it can kind of help an agent like a really quick rundown, I guess, of what your book is about. Show them that you can succinctly convey your concept in one sentence. Then it's a good sign that you have somewhat of a high concept pitch. I do see down in your comps that this is influenced by Arabian mythology set during the scientific revolution. I would put that up here. You would have your manuscript wishes personalization if you can. And then you would say, I'm seeking representation or something along the lines of that. So yeah, this log line, I would clarify some world building details. I guess we'll go into the pitch and see if we get some insight there. Mari DiCario, an eccentric star-obsessed astronomer, is her family's greatest disappointment. Unlike her siblings, the future premiere and a motion picture star in the making, Kamari's aspirations of studying the flickering corpses littering the night sky is far too common and far too ordinary. Okay, so this is our intro to the main character. This is good. Eccentric star-obsessed astronomer is her family's greatest disappointment. It's like a political leader, a motion picture star in the making. The other question I would have is this a secondary world? At first, I read this as like one sibling who is both the future premiere and a motion picture star in the making. So it might be worth it to say sister, a motion picture star in the making. Alternatively, I don't know if all of these details are actually important to the pitch that we have to know like who her siblings are. I think we should just say here is like emphasize like how or why her family thinks that her scientific interest isn't valuable. So seems like she just like comes from a really like well established, accomplished family, and like science isn't seen as something that is all that interesting. The other note I would say is just that common/ordinary is repetitive. So it seems like in this world, the stars are like living beings, like they bodies or people or like some kind of sentient thing. Why would her family not see that as something that's like a worthy endeavor? Is it seen as frivolous? Seen as frivolous / like, or is it not a common belief that the stars are like sentient beings or whatever? So do they think that, is this like akin to her believing in Santa Claus in this world? I think that's worth clarifying in this opening paragraph. You don't have to use this language, but that's just like a thought. When Kamari's experiments on the ashes of a fallen star lead to the discovery of a new and unstable element, she is shepherded away from the rolling hills and sprawling vineyards of her family's estate. I think you can just say she is shepherded away to the prestigious. So she is studying something that is deemed like ordinary, uninteresting. Her discovery actually leads somewhere. So that's kind of cool. However, when Kamari's experiments on the ashes of fallen lead to the discovery of a new and unstable element, she is shepherded away to the prestigious Opal Institute. Her research births new medicines, furthering scientific innovations, and catapults her to the top of every nation's wish list. Soon after the glitz and glam of high society wears off, Kamari discovers her gifts to humanity are being reverse engineered to create weapons that threaten their very existence. In a desperate attempt to stop them, Kamari calls out to the once worshipped now forgotten stars. And for the first time in a millennia, they answer. Okay. So, lots of things happening. So this is our introduction to our character. This is our inciting incident. I'm going to come back to this. Ripped from the night sky and chained to a dying world, Lyra is the archer and the last person Kamari expects to come to her aid. But when Lyra can't return to her place in the sky and constellations are disappearing at an alarming rate, she must enlist Kamari and her fellow Celestials to regain their powers before all of the stars fall. Worse yet, without its guardians, the celestial prison is fracturing. And the monsters Lyra and her people almost died locking away are close to escaping and unleashing death and destruction onto the mortal world once more. Okay, there's lots of really cool ideas in here. I think one question I would have is, how do the weapons that Kamari realizes are being created connect to what's happening with the Celestials? Bringing up the monsters right at the end, this was previously not introduced. I would decide if that's important. How does this discovery connect to the conflict with the Celestials? Okay, if these monsters are very important to the plot, I'd establish them earlier in the pitch. The monsters have unleashed death and destruction on the mortal world before, so it might be worth mentioning that maybe somewhere here. I think some questions to consider are, how do all of the details connect to each other? I think there's a good connection here. In the beginning, we're introduced to Kamari, that she's an astronomer. Her discoveries lead to something. Then she realizes that her discoveries are being used for something not good. She calls out to these stars. But then this paragraph 3 of a blurb should reinforce stakes of the conflict introduced in paragraph 2. Inciting incident, conflict, and then this is intro to protagonist. The structure is definitely there. I would take another look at this stakes paragraph because I think some of the ideas aren't quite connecting here. So for example, the constellations that are disappearing at an alarming rate. She must enlist Kamari and her fellow Celestials to regain their powers before all of the stars fall. Does Lyra/Kamari know why the constellations are disappearing and why they've lost their powers? Or is that part of the mystery? Why is the world dying? Is this the mortal world? Like the one that Kamari lives in? So you don't need to necessarily answer all these questions in the pitch, but every single detail that is mentioned in a pitch, like the idea should be connected. I think where I'm getting a little bit lost, trying to understand how all the conflicts are kind of intertwined. So I would love to see like Kamari's discovery about these weapons connects directly to this conflict that the Celestials are going through, because I don't quite see the connection, and maybe the characters don't know yet, and that might be something that you put in the pitch, is that the characters are trying to unravel how these two things are connected. I will say that this is one of those things where the idea and the premise seem really, really strong, and I, again, wouldn't be surprised if you get interest just on how it is. But when it comes to these like fine tuning of details, a lot of the times it's just like, I feel like sometimes the polishing of your idea and like how much you can focus down your core ideas is like what separates an agent being like, this is cool, but I might not ask for sample pages on this, versus like, oh, maybe I will continue down to the sample page. Inspired by the world legend of Korra, this novel combines the high stakes divine forces of Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross and the intricate world building and unique magic system as seen in Sarah A. Parker's When the Moon Hatched. I think that's fine. You have 2 books. These are both recent and they're both very popular. Intricate world building, unique magic system. This might be too vague. If there's something specific in the world building and something specific in the magic system that's like similar, I would consider that. And then the other thing I would say, so actually, because you have 2 great book comps, You might not need to mention this. I would maybe not mention this unless the agent has Cora on their manuscript wish list. The other thing that you can consider with comps is if you can speak to the book's themes a bit. Like if there's a comp that goes into like, I don't know, whatever the themes of your book are, whether that's like pushing the limits of scientific discovery or like balancing the pursuit of like great knowledge and human good and something like that, right? I think themes are always like a really nice thing to wrap in with your comps so that like an agent can get a sense for like what your work is trying to do and trying to say, but it's not 100% necessary. Thank you so much for sending in your query letter. Our next pitch comes from Alyssa. Thank you so much, Alyssa, for sending in your pitch. I do actually remember, so Alyssa and I have chatted before. I do remember you saying that you are also writing cyberpunk. Love and Other Drugs 90K is a literary fiction novel with cyberpunk-inspired elements. Think the poetic language of This Is How You Lose the Time War meets the mind-altering drugs of Escape from Spiderhead with the visual landscape of Blade Runner. This book was partially inspired by the deteriorating condition of Vancouver's own Chinatown and seeks to put characters of Asian descent at the forefront of the cyberpunk genre, a subgenre that often borrows from Asian aesthetics but doesn't allow these characters the same autonomy as their Western counterparts. Okay. So great word count, literary cyberpunk, very up my alley. If I was an agent, I would request just based on that, but that's just me. Instead of saying poetic language, I had a few query letters where I also comped to Time War. Instead of poetic language, I would consider saying like voice. Yeah, voice might be the better word here. Meets the mind-altering drugs of Escape from Spiderhead. Comping to 2 movies, I would just say consider making one of these a book. I think it's always better to comp either to like one popular book and one very well targeted and well explained movie. I'm partial to keeping Blade Runner and then changing Escape from Spiderhead into a book, but that's just me. If you're a resident of Vancouver, I would like mention that, I guess. Actually, you know what? I would put this entire thing down here. Here's the thing about this paragraph. I would only include it if you're a resident of Vancouver or like you've lived there significantly. So there's kind of that like own voices element. And then I would also, I know you're speaking to the techno-orientalism that exists in the cyberpunk genre, which is very much a thing. My only sticking point with this precise language is that you don't want to make it sound like you're necessarily explaining techno-orientalism to the agent, but I would only mention it if your work goes out of its way to really dissect techno-orientalism in cyberpunk. Like if that's like really one of your core intentions with the work. You can say something like, as a Vancouver resident. Also, you can say like, and an Asian writer. This book was partially inspired and seeks to, I would speak like less generally about like what cyberpunk is. I would speak more to like your work specifically. Okay, I just made something up. I made this up. Here is like a suggestion. You can change the language to whatever is like more specific to your work, but explaining your intention with the work is not always necessary in a query letter, but if it is, I think it is important to give an agent an idea for like why you're explaining the intention with your work. So if it's coming from like an own voices perspective, you could say something like, as a Vancouver resident and Asian writer, this book was partially inspired by the deteriorating condition of Vancouver's Chinatown and seeks to interrogate techno-orientalism while examining the fetishization of Asian women and cultural appropriation. So whatever your work is, I don't know if your work is actually trying to do these things, but that's just an example for like how to be a little bit more specific. You do mention like autonomy, so you might maybe change the language to while examining cultural appropriation. Whatever you think your work is trying to do, however you think your story is trying to tackle techno-orientalism specifically, I think that is worth explaining rather than just explaining techno-orientalism itself. Angelis Vidal is a borderline bipolar drug dealer with the unfortunate tendency to self-medicate. Her product, Liquid Emotion. Rapture, pure happiness in a syringe, available at Chinatown's Fortune nightclub for an exorbitant price. Rent isn't cheap and pesky politicians keep trying to shut down her illicit local business. Love that. Love that. That's a great, concise introduction to the main character. Rafael Rami Solis, heir to the largest pharmaceutical conglomerate on Turtle Island, is being... Okay, so this is not a secondary world. I would also specify the year. None of the news outlets can figure out why. In secret, Raphael is suffering from a hereditary neurodegenerative disease. The only way to win back his mother's love and family fortune is to find a cure that doesn't exist. Great stakes. The lives of two scientists, one self-trained and the other publicly lauded, become embroiled when Raphael's best friend is found dead from a drug overdose. Angelis sold Parissa drugs, but she's adamant that isn't what killed her. The best friend is named Parissa because the name Parissa just comes out of nowhere. Rival drug dealers in the red light district have been lacing products with too much filler due to supply shortages. The upper class takes advantage of Parissa's high-profile death, a local politician's beloved daughter, to push forward a bill that will legalize emotion-based drugs and turn the government a hefty profit. Okay. Raphael soon discovers that Angelis is developing a far more dangerous drug that simulates love. Neither one fully trusts the other, but if they combine their expertise, Angelis can legitimize her business and Raphael may finally have a cure. Their only obstacles: discovering Parissa's real murderers may tear apart their temporary partnership before it's really begun. Raphael's mother and Parissa's father orchestrated Parissa's martyrdom in order to get the bill passed that will allow soulless corporations to be the sole manufacturer of rapture. Raphael must choose between a mother whose approval he's always craved and a near stranger he's been medically induced to love. Angelis needs to get clean or risk losing everything she's worked for. So we get a lot of details in this paragraph. Okay, let's take a look at this. Are Angelis and Raphael the two scientists? I think we need to like simplify details a little bit. They come from two different worlds, have their lives unexpectedly intertwined when a local politician's beloved daughter, Angelis, had sold her drugs. Okay, we should use her name. I'm assuming that. Adamant that Parissa's death is due to all these other details about the filler and the supply shortages. I don't think you need that. Actually, you know what? Do we need to know this? So one thing I am noticing about the pitch in general is that it's very long. It's like almost 500 words. I would be very careful about going over 400 words for any query letter. Almost doesn't fit on a page. So yeah, I would try to just like really pare down details because I think you've put in a lot of very cool details into your pitch. Like, I don't think that we need to know everything. There's definitely like focus on one or two core stakes. We can mention that this is the best friend because that's how they become intertwined, I guess. Instead of saying this, can we just like, is this what will cure him? So instead of giving these like very precise world building details, I think you can just say, you want to, with this line, clarify that this is the reason that Raphael needs to work with her even though he doesn't trust her. Because otherwise that connective tissue is just a little too vague. With a side effect, may finally restore damage in Raphael's brain. So this way the cure is clarified. Their only obstacles: discovering Parissa's real murderers may tear apart their temporary partnership before it's even begun. Can we just kind of say something like, the mystery of Parissa's real murderers, family's own corporation, may have had a hand in orchestrating. He must be forced to confront. You just say like where his true allegiances really lie, while Angelis. Okay, so I think Raphael's stakes are really strong. These stakes could be more specific. I am a current UBC undergraduate majoring in creative writing. My work typically focuses on fiction and screenwriting. That's all a great bio as well. This is obviously a fantastic pitch. I think there's so many really cool ideas in here. To me, this actually just sounds like a straight up cyberpunk novel. And so I almost think you might have a better time just querying it as a cyberpunk novel. As someone who queried my book as like a literary fiction novel, like I don't know if that hurt me to be honest. You did mention that the voice might be literary, so that's up to you. I think honestly, like, this pitch is really good. I think your ideas are really fresh. I think the only thing is that you just want to like pare back some of the details. Thank you so much to all of the writers who sent in their queries for this video. I know it's really, really tough to be vulnerable with your query letters and to let all of us, you know, learn and dissect your pitches together. I will say I'm like extremely impressed by the queries that everyone sent in. I feel like these are honestly really strong, actually a lot better than a lot of the drafts of my own query letter. I do have a video about that if you guys want to see like my query letter that I sent out to most agents. If any of the writers want to share anything about their querying stats and the interest that they've been getting, if they've already signed with an agent, let us know. My debut novel is a literary science fiction novel. It's called Local Heavens. It comes out fall 2025. It is a queer cyberpunk reimagining of The Great Gatsby, and you can add it on Goodreads, Storygraph. Once again, thank you to my Ko-fi members as well for supporting my work. If you guys want to support the channel, my Ko-fi is open for one-time donations. It is also open monthly memberships. At the second tier, I offer query letter critiques. So if you want me to beta read your query letter, but you obviously don't want it to be public on my channel, then you can sign up for my monthly critique slots. That's all. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.